Hello, my name is Dan, aka Spiritual Tradie, and today I just wanted to officially declare myself a flat earth denier and make it abundantly clear that I do believe that the earth is spherical and not flat, as some people have alleged. As you can see from this picture behind me, that's clearly behind me, that the earth is round and spherical and not at all flat. And while I'm looking at the round earth, thinking about flat earth and round earth and weighing the two up, what are we really talking about when we talk about round earth and flat earth? What are we talking about? We're talking about a world view. It's the way that we see the world. Anyway, I can't talk to you about this anymore because Tameka's here. So we've got to go and speak to Tameka. Anyway, let's get back to this later. Hello, Tameka. Welcome to the round earth. Tameka Buckley, we are live. Are you ready?
Hello!
We're live. Are you ready?
Are we live?
We're already live.
Oh, hi.
No time for preparation. We're already in.
Awesome. I love it. Dive right in. I'm great. How are
Happy
you?
birthday for the other day too, by the way.
Thank you. It was so funny because I got all of these beautiful messages from people saying, I hope you're having a great birthday despite the ISO. And I was sort of thinking, this is one of the best birthdays I've ever had. I have not actually doing much differently than I otherwise would have.
Yeah. And that's a funny thing for all the introverts and quieter people on the planet. Everyone's like, oh, what, the lockdown? We're like, yeah, since 2003.
Yeah. Learning to meditate, I've checked out.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, it's been weird to have to pretend that we're isolating, right?
I saw this really funny meme on social media. You may have seen it as well. And it said, introvert friends, reach out to your extrovert pals because they have no idea how this works. Because it was just so true.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I just have to make some minor adjustments here. Here we go.
I knew you would do this. I knew it.
We've got the bedroom eyes are on this side. So this is my backdrop for today.
It's going to be too distracting, please. I wouldn't have to take myself seriously.
I just want the music bedroom eyes to come on. Okay, I can change it if you like. We can.
Please change it. I will not be able to think straight. I'll be giggling. That's beautiful.
Go back to the forest.
Beautiful.
So we can take it a little bit more seriously.
Okay.
Otherwise,
not too seriously,
not too seriously, but just it would be weird looking at yourself, as well.
It's funny. I had a girlfriend ask me how I felt about the professional photos I had taken, and I don't. It doesn't feel like me. It just feels like. So I guess in some ways I have to think about whether or not, and they're not all like that, which most of them are. Kind of, there are ones of me sitting in meditation and without breathing through my mouth, as the photographer kept on telling me to do. But it's funny because I look at them and I think it feels like marketing collateral. It doesn't feel like, and I guess it's something I still have to adjust to, is the difference that you have, that difference in communion that you have when you're actually with someone.
Yeah. And
how you kind of, I guess, reconcile that with how you market yourself if you're running a business, particularly a business like we're running, where we want to deeply connect with people.
But also goes to show that, that when, there are these different faces to ourselves, and you might not have wanted necessarily to show that to the camera, but it picked it up anyway.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. It was really, really fun and such a beautiful, because I went into that, people probably watching didn't necessarily see the post I made about it, but basically in India, meditation and yoga, I've been aware that I have some shots taken for professional use in particular, because I'll be working in corporate, and there's a degree of professionalism that's that's required, and I've been aware that I need to kind of play that game and get some shots taken, and but was not overly interested in it, and kind of just booked somebody who a friend had booked, and didn't really do any research, and rocked up and realised I booked myself for this sort of glamour photo shoot. And here I was, you know, with my business shirts and my India spiritual scarves, and she showed me some photos of what her normal shoots are like, and it's sort of women posing very provocatively in their lingerie, and
and that's how.
And she kind of looked at me, kind of puzzled, and she had this look in her eyes, like, "Didn't you look at my stuff on Instagram?"
That's how you get here, right?
And that's how you get there. And look, that's minor. There were some other ones that were definitely that I wasn't even going to purchase. It was fun, and just a perfect example of how nature gives us what we need. Because I went into the shoot and wanted to get some professional shots taken, and it ended up being a very different experience where I was on set with these two great women, and we were playing music, and I've been bridesmaid 5 times now, and it's the only occasion where I've had my hair and makeup professionally done, and so it was really beautiful to actually have this experience that was all about me, particularly because I've recently separated from my wonderful former partner, and it actually, I came away from that experience really feeling like it was something that every woman should do, if not that exact experience, but something that is simply about yourself and celebrating, you know, perhaps a side of yourself that I realise I've kind of turned away from in many ways since being on a more deliberately spiritual path, because there's a part of me that I guess went through a phase of invalidating reality world type things, like the importance of the way we look, or wanting to be seen as a sexy woman, or whatever that may be, and that actually we don't want to be ignoring any part of ourselves, and it was really beautiful for me to have the opportunity to celebrate that deeply feminine sexual part of who I am, particularly having come out of a relationship and feelings that come with that separation. So nature gave me exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed,
and me too, and me too, clearly.
You too,
for the podcast purposes.
Yeah, well, exactly. There you go. I knew you'd bring it up.
So how did you become spiritual?
Well, I mean, I guess the only response I can offer to that is that we're all spiritual, right?
Of course. Yes.
But I was very lucky in that my mum, from a very young age, I remember my mum practicing yoga, actually, and the physical practice of yoga, the asana, was kind of, I guess, my joy into a more dedicated spiritual life. And my mum used to practice, there's this yoga teacher from the 70s called Swami Saraswati, and my mum would practice each morning to the VHS tape, and I would copy my mum from when I was probably 7 years old.
Wow.
And then went on to do a little bit of yoga as a young adult, but then really kind of started diving in. I played a lot of netball when I was younger, and part of the pre-season prep for that became a yoga class, and that's when I fell in love with yoga. And I guess as a young woman with lots of anxiety and the standard things that come with being a teenage girl, being on the yoga mat and being pulled into my body in that way and present, it was the only time that I felt okay about myself. And
do you mind speaking about all the things that come with being a teenage girl for someone that doesn't have that experience?
Yeah, and you know, it's actually a conversation I would love to have with that I'm glad that I get to have with you, Dan, because I've thought a lot about what is the experience of a teenage boy, because my experience as a teenage girl was, I mean, I've had a lot of anxiety since I was a very young person, and I guess it didn't necessarily amplify as a teenage girl, but it probably highlighted a lot of standard discomforts in terms of body image, and your body is changing, and perhaps the people around you are starting to relate to you in a different way because they see those changes and you're not sure what those changes mean, and how to flow with them. And so I became very self-conscious about my body. And I mean, what it all came down to was fear of what other people thought of me. And I realize, as every time we sit down to meditate, we release a little more of the, I guess, the shells we've created around ourselves. But what it all comes down to is that fear of what other people thought. And I see how much of my personality as a young woman and as an adult has simply been crafted as a response to what I thought people thought about me. It's not even what they really think about you, is it? It's our perception of what we think they think about us.
It's always the worst case scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for me as a young woman, it was body image stuff. It was uncertainty about how to relate to the opposite sex in a way that made me feel safe. And the yoga mat and the yoga practice allowed me to kind of forget about it, come back to myself. And it provided a framework, and in time, because I was blessed with teachers who didn't just teach the asana, they dropped little breadcrumbs about the philosophies of yoga as well. And in time, that led to a framework that allowed me to kind of explore this spiritual part of myself that had always been present from a very young person. And I think a lot of my anxiety was linked to the fact that I was having experiences and seeing things and engaging in the world in a way that was so real for me, but I didn't have the context to understand or the framework. And so I guess kind of tried to close my eyes to a lot of what was actually what my experience was, and ignore a key part of who I was. And so yoga gave me a framework to kind of explore the spiritual life a little bit more.
Just on that, have you? I don't know what kind of contact you have with teenage girls currently, but is there a conversation around opening that up and trying to communicate that there's things happening that some people might be having that experience of, and the need to address that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And it's something that I'm starting to really discover as I have more conversations like this with people is how many of us, particularly as children and young people, are having experiences that the adult world have probably also had themselves at some point, but have chosen to forget or ignore or whatever. And it makes you feel very alone, and there's no context to understand them. And absolutely, I've taught a couple of young women since I have been teaching Vedic meditation who have shared very, very intense cosmic experiences that they've been having, which have been deeply frightening to them because they seem foreign. It seems unnatural, where they're actually having incredibly expansive experiences which feel terrifying to them because they've got no adult who's able to tell them what's going on, explain that it's actually very natural, and allow them to feel safe to explore it. So it is something I think about, is how much of the anxiety we're seeing increasingly in young people is related to these experiences that they're having, and they just have the framework to explore them, or even articulate them.
So do you have any I don't want to get into experience weighing up, but do you have anything any experiences that you had that kind of made you think, oh, this is a little bit more to this yoga than what I thought it was originally?
Yeah, I mean, for me it was always very very quickly for me the practice became less about the physical body and more about the internal things that I experienced when I was on the yoga mat. And I realize now that even that was less about the postures and more about the fact that I was being pulled into the present moment and actually able to feel what was happening inside all the time, but perhaps most of the time wasn't actually aware of. And often in Shavasana in particular, which until that point, because I didn't have a meditation practice, was as close to letting go as I was able to come. I had, I guess lots of physical experiences in terms of the energy moving through the body in quite a strong way, which then provoked sort of some physical movement in the body, and awareness of things that other people may not be able to see happening in terms of visual entities and or colors or whatever.
So what did you do with that then at that age?
At that age, with that little breadcrumb of it, it was the carrot for me, of okay, there's more here. And I was very lucky because I didn't have a teacher who was able to guide me in that. None of the teachers I had, well, they weren't speaking about it. I didn't feel able to approach them. And because I didn't have any teachers who were able to guide me in that, I was very fortunate because it forced me to do the research and explore myself. And then, and I tried lots of different things and researched lots of different religions. And because I always had this great sense of God, but nothing I read about Christianity when I was about 16, I toyed seriously with becoming a nun. And I realized I realize now that there's various reasons why that was a desire at the time, but in terms of wanting to hide from masculine energy and also lots of past lives as well, where that was a lifestyle I had. But I explored lots of different religions, and spoke to many people who I thought were spiritual, and who are spiritual, but from yoga teachers to healers, but no one could tell me what God was. No one could really help me understand, and at that point I simply wanted validation of what I was experiencing. And it was just such a relief to come to Vedic meditation and all of a sudden have a framework that was absolutely limitless in how far it could take me, because everything else, and of course, yoga, it's the same tradition, but every other person or tradition I had engaged with actively, it was always an end point. It could only take me so far. When it came down to what is God, no one really seemed to have an answer. And that's why I love the Vedic world.
It kind of stays in the more like abstract areas, like it's that over there.
Yeah.
We won't unpack it.
Yes. And for some people, what I've realized is that the abstract sort of intellectual discussions of things, for some people, it seems to come that way first, and then that perhaps can provoke experience. But for me, it's the opposite. For me, it's experience first. And I kind of joke with friends sometimes about how, I'll speak to them about some sort of revelation I've had, which probably sounds quite basic. And I've understood it in a cognitive sense, but until I have that experience and live it, I can't really understand it.
Yeah.
So experience for me is everything, and I very much veer towards experience first. Which is why I think it was so hard for so long, is I was having all these experiences and I just didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah. So then you have the experience and you try and run around to find the correlating knowledge to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, the Vedic tradition holds all of it so well, is that whatever's happening, there's a place for it. We know where it belongs. Nothing seems to be outside of the scope. So it's comforting, but it's also it's good, because it just means that wherever you are on your journey, you can fit into it, and it gives you a sort of orientation of where we're going. So it's not like I'm just floundering around, going through these emotional upheavals or these spiritual upheavals, and I don't know where I'm going, and I'm just constantly seeking for God, but God never seems to be coming because I've externalized it, and all this kind of stuff. So that was a life changer for me as well too. And just before we started podcasting, I was doing a little monologue about flat Earth and about worldviews, and so that must be how this ties into having a worldview. Not because we all have a worldview, whether we like it or not, and most of us pick up unconscious worldviews based on parental guidance, based on schooling, based on TV and media. And so we accumulate, and through experience as well, no doubt, we accumulate these bit pieces of worldviews. And I like one of these sayings, I don't know who said it, but it was, whatever your highest, the thing you hold highest is your God. It doesn't matter if you hold football to be the highest thing, or alcohol to be the highest thing, or God itself to be the highest thing. Whatever, even if you're atheist, you still have a God. It's just whatever you hold is in the highest regard. And so we all have these unconscious worldviews that we've formed bit pieces of, and we take bits from over here and bits from over there. And And when we start meditating, we start to realize that these bit piece worldviews fall apart with the direct experience of self. We connect in and we're like, oh shit, this doesn't correlate anymore to my worldview. And so on a spiritual path, that happens a lot. It doesn't matter what tradition you go down, you'll start to have the direct experience, and then the worldview falls apart, and you can very easily pick up religious views or other worldviews that again aren't complete and don't give you the full picture and deliver you to the completion of your evolution. And so I found that as well with Vedic, that finally something was matching up to my experience, knowledge and experience, and I was like, they know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And so I guess the beginning of my awakening was very rough and tumultuous, because I was having all these experiences with nowhere to put it, and I was like, I don't know about time anymore. It doesn't seem to make sense in the way I understood it. And I was like telling people that have no experience with spirituality, no experience with meditation, my ideas, my concepts, and they were like, you're fucking crazy. And then you go and find this stuff, and you hear, someone say it, this is how it works. And you're like, I can relax. It's okay. How it works, and it's beautiful. Yeah. It's life changer.
Yeah. And even, it's something I'm trying to, and a muscle I'm trying to develop, I guess, is how to articulate the experience, not for the sake of sharing it necessarily, but so that you can then actually be able to put that experience to use in terms of so what does it mean? You might have this incredible experience about time and how it doesn't exist, and oh shit, actually and actually really experience that and kind of flip out. It's the first time it's happened. Well, I've had an experience prompted by watching a movie, but I saw Interstellar for perhaps the second time, I think. Have you seen that movie?
I think so. I get it confused with Contact, so I'm not sure exactly which one it is.
Yeah, but Interstellar, it's the one with Spunky Matthew McConaughey in it, but it's it's very good. And I remember watching it the first time. I don't know if I was a meditator at that point, but loving it. But I watched it again a few weeks ago, and it was the catalyst for this incredible, because it goes into quantum physics and the nature of time, and it was a catalyst for this incredible experience. And I'm still really unpacking that experience and trying to kind of learn how to articulate things in a way that I can then break down and share with students, for instance, so that it can actually be of use. And it's like it's so hard sometimes to articulate what is going on, because words there's no language. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's also so fun,
Oh, so fun.
To take this big unspeakable, you can't speak about it, experience, and then be like, okay, how can I break it down? And then put you take it from the infinite, put it into this tiny little bit rate, and then transmit it through these weird mouth sounds into someone's skull head holes. And then they have to translate it again and try to unpack it. And, it's a challenge. It's good fun.
And what I've kind of started doing is, often after I have these big experiences, is I'll go for a walk along the beach, for instance, and almost pretend that I'm trying to, and I do it with some friends, I do it with friends as well. I might record a video, message, simply audio, and actually try to explain what's taking place, because it allows me to understand it so much more. And then you kind of are given different little paths to go down to apply what it actually means. But it's so funny, isn't it? When it happens, you have these moments where, am I blissed out? Am I devastated? Here I'm I'm laughing, but I'm also sobbing. What? It's so funny.
I'm just open, just infinitely open. Yeah, and I guess that is part of the challenge as well, to be able to communicate the experiences you're having relevantly as well, and not just making it all sound too big and unattainable for people, because you don't want it to to feel like if someone's not having that experience, they're not spiritual, you know.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's also so much good fun, especially to get together with other Vedic meditators and nerd out about it.
Yeah, isn't it? It's so funny.
Yeah.
I love it.
So let's go back then to you're doing yoga into your late teens, let's say. Then I'm going to guess you left school after that.
Did.
Psychic.
There you go. Yeah. An eternal student, but not an eternal student in the confines of the schoolroom. So again, I an incredible piece of, which at the time did not feel fortunate, of course, and but I finished school and went on to do an arts degree, which I loved, and then my whole life I'd been planning to travel. I'd always had the travel bug, so I went overseas and was planning to come back and do an honours in sociology. However, was also starting to kind of deepen my awareness of different paths that were possible to me, I suppose. I'm the eldest of 4, the only girl, and I guess in the family, the label that I kind of occupied was good, academic good girl. Probably I kind of manufactured an expectation of myself that I thought that I had to go down a very conventional path in life. And because I assumed that so much, I didn't see what else was available to me. And all of a sudden I was starting to see that, oh, actually, I could study this. There's this thing called naturopathy. I'd never heard of naturopathy. I didn't know you could study herbs. I didn't know that there was anything called kinesiology. I hadn't heard a little bit about meditation, but my path in life was going to be very kind of white collar, academic, conservative, and I was kind of on this cusp of understanding that there was a different path to take, but certainly not feeling free enough to pursue it at that point. And then when I was overseas, a very dear friend of mine died very suddenly. And that was a very challenging experience, of course, but an absolute turning point for my life, which I'm deeply grateful, because it propelled me out of a sense of help, a sense of acceptance that this is how my life is going to look, and there was no deviation from that. And when he died, I realized, because I was sort of 22, nobody, you feel like you're invisible. And I thought, I only have one life here. This is it. And so that was, I guess, one of the most obvious catalysts for me to start really actively seeking in a different way. And it caused a lot of confusion for me, because all of a sudden I was starting to make choices that were outside the realm of the right good girl choices I've always made within my family.
Yep.
And, so I decided that I wasn't going to take up the position to the honours place, just to keep studying. And I went on to study holistic counselling and mind-body medicine, which uses flower essences. That's a very subtle form of healing. And then, got into a health food store. And so all of a sudden was starting to be exposed to all these different ideas and ways of being that were quite outside the realm of the very kind of white-collar conservative home that I'd lived in. All of a sudden, I had all these different ideas around environmentalism, and I don't know, a whole world opened up.
Yeah.
And I started, I became a yoga teacher, and I thought that was it. I thought I'd found it. I laughed to myself so often, Dan, because for so many years, I thought that there would be a point. It's like, yes, I'm healed. I've arrived. Here I am. Here I am, world.
Nothing more to do.
Human.
Yeah.
And I thought yoga was it for me. I thought, yes, I found my calling. This is it. This is what I'll be doing. And it's been a habit of mine. I think it's a habit of a lot of us that tendency to maintain. We find what we think works, and we're like, yep, this is going to be it. This is me forever now.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, and then, but was still feeling very. I knew that there was still more puzzle pieces to fall into place, and resigned from the job that I loved And again, I had an expectation I would be doing that forever. And this was another big turning point for me. So ever since I was a child, I'd wanted to walk the Camino de Santiago. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a pilgrimage route. There's a few different routes. There's many different routes actually, but the traditional one starts on the French side of the Pyrenees and ends up in Santiago on the west coast of Spain. So it's about 800 kilometres, and pilgrims have been walking this route.
You walked there?
Yeah.
800 kilometres?
Yes.
What?
Yes, it was amazing. So pilgrims have been taking this route. So it was traditionally Catholic, but I found out later that it actually, as with many things from Catholicism or Christianity in general, it has pagan roots as well. So it actually follows some powerful ley lines in the earth. So it used to be walked by Catholics as a way to, the idea was that if you made this pilgrimage in your lifetime, you would be absolved of sin and therefore be able to get into heaven. So the power of that path, the energy of that path is laden with intent. It's very powerful. So you start on the French side of the Pyrenees, and so it takes about a month to walk. And I went there with a very deliberate focus, which was I had understood from my teaching of yoga and my practice of yoga this idea that God was within, and I understood that. Well, I knew it was a thing intellectually, but I wanted to experience that. And so that was my intention as I was walking. And so I would chant mantra every morning and just contemplate God, really contemplate what Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. What does this mean?
What does this mean? So you're doing this, are you a Vedic meditator at this point?
No, not a Vedic meditator. So I was 28 and I just turned 35. So this was 7 years ago. So not a Vedic meditator yet.
Okay.
So that was, it's pretty intense. In hindsight, the whole pilgrimage is like one long Vedic meditation session.
Right.
It's like, because it's just, you walk sort of 25, 30 kilometers a day and all you can do is think.
Yes.
It really breaks people.
Yes.
And that, I guess, allowed me to stay.
Do you not talk? Do you be quiet?
No, you can talk. Okay. Yeah. And look, there's so many different ways to do it. I tried to, because I went there with the intention of making it sort of a spiritual journey. I deliberately walked by myself for the first part of the day so I could have that time to reflect. And then the second part of the day, I would walk with friends. And it's really one of the joys of the Camino, and the synchronicities that occur when you're walking is just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful. And then came home and had probably my second quarter life crisis.
Yes.
And just didn't know what to do with myself, really. There was still this seed that there's a deeper spiritual path out there. There's a deeper spiritual truth, and I hadn't been able to find it myself. And so
what was the result of walking for God? How did that go?
Oh, look, I had some really big healing moments and resolved a lot. Mm-hmm. Resolved a lot internally that I then came home and put into practice, thereby creating a ripple effect. As we change, as I'm sure we've all experienced, we change. We force the other people around us to change as in the way they relate to us, and that so again that prompted a big kind of reshuffling of. It was hard. It was very hard. There were a couple of really challenging years following that. Because I guess the outcome of walking for God was that I realized God was so much greater than I could comprehend, but I still came out of it thinking, but what do I do with this? Mm-hmm. Still didn't have.
Is your hand okay? It's a bit red.
Oh God, yeah, I burnt it. Oh. So I was filling up my hot water bottle. Oh. And sort of absent-mindedly reached over the kettle, and it was dark, so I got back into bed with my hot water bottle and I thought, oh, bloody hell, that hurt. Oh. Then, I woke up the next day and I had charred myself quite well.
Yeah. So you trekked for God and you came home and it was tough for a little while.
It was.
And you still knew that there's more spiritual to do. Mm.
but didn't know what the heck. I thought I'd tried everything, and I arrived at a place of and still experiencing intense anxiety. My whole life has been intensely, and again, what a gift, because it propelled me to kind of find a different way of being. But then I arrived at this place of acceptance, and I feel quite emotional thinking about it. And I decided that this was life, and that it wasn't, that it wasn't going to get any better. And I think that that's why that period of time was so hard. It's because I had this belief, or I had this feeling that there was something so much greater. But all the research I had done hadn't, of course, it led somewhere, but I hadn't found it. I was attached to the outcome of finding it. And so, along with the acceptance of this is it, there was a real sense of helplessness and despair as well. So I guess I dwelled in that. I was still engaged with life and having fun, and it's not like I was sort of at home in bed in some deep dark depression for years, but inside I just felt, I guess, numb. And then I'd heard of this thing called Vedic meditation. It'd been on my radar. A few people, I think podcaster, or actually Sarah Wilson I used to follow a lot, so I think I first heard about it through her, and it kept on popping up. But every time it popped up, I thought, there was just a sense of not yet. I knew that it was 20 minutes twice a day, and I didn't feel in a place where I could really devote myself to that. And so there was a sense of, I'm saving that for when I'm actually ready. And then a friend of mine who Rachel Campbell.
Yeah, Rachie.
Yeah, Rachie C. I saw her, and she'd just come back. So when I met Rachel, she was like my perception of her was this sort of like formless socialite, glamazon, which she kind of still is, likes the high life, loves luxury. And I saw her, and she'd just come back from India.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't reconcile the Rachel I knew with this person who was telling me she'd been meditating because she did a rounding retreat with Johnny and Laura.
I was on that retreat.
Were you with her?
Yes.
It blew my mind that like fancy luxury minded Rachel Campbell would be meditating in India for 14 hours a day. And I saw her, and she was wearing her India clothes.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on here? And she told me about this thing that she'd learned, Vedic meditation, and I thought, wow, if you have been informed so much by this, okay, this is it. I felt like this was the time. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to Laura Poole, and I had the classic thought that I think a lot of people may feel when they first approach about learning meditation. I didn't understand the value of it, and so when I heard the price, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not ready,
Yeah.
And then Rachel and Laura announced that they were going to be running a retreat in India, a learn Vedic meditation retreat. Uh-huh. And I had no way of affording it, but there was just this moment of clarity, and I saw visually in my mind, yes. And every time the intellect I guess this is, when I think about it, probably the first instance of charm, choiceless charm. There was just no alternative. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but it was just yes. Just kept, it was like it was flashing in my head. And so I decided to, so I followed the charm, and had no idea how I was going to afford it. And then my great grandmother died, and I was left some money, and that kind of funded the trip. And and then it's the start of a whole new journey, but one that reignited it gave me hope again.
So what was that like in being in India, learning to meditate? Because you have to fly over there not being a meditator, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the context of that for me is that I had done a lot of spiritual work. Mm-hmm. I had done a lot. And ever since I can remember, I have had, what we now tend to refer to as cosmic experiences, and was able to see things that other people necessarily weren't. And so I remember as the plane was approaching India, I I could see the deva of the land, just that I could see India, I could see her, and just and it was funny. It didn't nothing. I was just unshakable. I think it felt so right that it's almost like as soon as I decided to learn Vedic meditation, it's like I became a meditator already.
Uh-huh.
So everything about it was choiceless, and I was just unshakable. I got to the airport, and my luggage didn't arrive, and all of this stuff happened. India stuff.
Yeah.
Classic. Nothing goes to plan, and all that stuff would have sent me into an absolute tailspin of fear. But it was like something had been ignited in me where I knew it was like I had the spirit of a meditator, the soul of a meditator, as soon as I decided to learn.
What was it like getting your mantra the first time and meditating with that? Was it good?
I can't really remember it.
Not that good then.
or so good that it's all a blur.
Yeah.
I think because the course for me was encompassed in this. I was in India for the first time for 10 days. The whole thing was such an experience.
Absolutely.
That the elements of like the learned Vedic meditation course, it was just it was kind of just absorbed into the whole journey.
It's also a deep dive into the sort of history of Veda and the history of India and and so that's a whole immersive experience, I guess. And
we went to, because we were with Laura, of course, so we went to all the the temples and did everything traditionally. It was very Vedic, and I enjoyed it, but as a tourist, and there were parts of me that was like, okay, this is a bit, it's a bit boring. How many times do we have to mantra? My back's getting a bit sore. Very much the tourist, and it's so that was the first time I went to India. So that must have been 2016.
16, yes. Rachel and I went in 16, because we went in 15.
Thank you. And that was the first time I'd been, and then the second time I went to India was for initiator training. And so in that period of meditating for 3 years and doing the rishis and the siddhis and all the stuff you need to do in preparation, by the time I got to India the second time, my experience of all of those things that I found a little bit boring, to be honest, because I didn't have the understanding or the state of being to understand to experience the subtleties of them, were a totally different experience. And don't get me wrong, there were still occasions where I was like, fuck, my back hurts.
Whenever this guy gets a control of the Jay Gurudev.
Whenever
the 4-hour ceremonies,
Dad, oh my gosh, I just remembered. So when we got to have you been to Shivanandi? Did you, at the little place on the river? Have you?
I don't know.
No. So that's where we stayed for the bulk of our training. So a little place about 250 k's north of Rishikesh. On Ganga in the foothills of the Himalayas, and it was day one, and Panditji was with us for the first 10 days or something, I think.
Yes.
And so I'm fresh off. So I'm fresh. I work. I'd been working full time at the Salvation Army, and that was very, very dynamic. And then you've got all of the unstressing that's happening in the lead up to IT, and all the second guessing that you're doing. And I don't really, because I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to. And so I fought that very, very hard. I had an idea about what my life was going to look like, and I was clinging to that.
Another idea?
Lots of ideas, Dan. I'm full of them. I'm full of ideas. And, so I'd been waging this inner battle, and work had been exhausting. And so I got to India, and I was just so burnt out. And then in day one of the official training, you're doing a 4-hour yagya with Panditji.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, and he has you so close to the fire that our clothes are literally catching on fire, getting charred. And I was sitting there thinking, what have I done? What have I done? I can't do this for the next 3 months. And honestly, I thought, what have I done? What have I done?
Yep, that sounds stressing for you.
Oh man. I
Yeah.
thought, am I going to have to do this every day for 3 months? What have I done?
What a blessing.
Big blessing.
Yeah. And so you said you felt choiceless to become a teacher.
Mm.
So yeah, how has that been going? How's that all happening?
So I'm coming up on, or we're coming up on the 23rd of May will be our 1 year anniversary of graduation. So
Right.
it's been different to what I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Life usually is, huh?
Oh, bloody oath. When will it stop surprising me? That my
Probably.
expectations aren't fulfilled.
God consciousness, maybe.
Maybe. So so before I went on training, I had just started a relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to stay together for the 3 months I was in India. And in hindsight, since we've separated, I really saw how, in many ways, I came home and I dove into being a teacher, of course, but I also dove back into being in relationship with him. And in many ways, it became it's like, because I was so focused on the excitement of reuniting with him and returning to life, because I spent a lot of time, I don't want to romanticize it. I'm not going to romanticize it. I spent probably 95% of my time on IT wanting to be somewhere else. It was very, on every single level.
What does that entail, just for people that don't know?
The training.
Yeah.
So at its peak, it's you're just challenged on every single level. And now, coming out the other side of it, I can see if I could go back there in an instant, I would. and Laura, our teacher, kept on telling us that, but I didn't believe her. I was just picturing my 5-star resort that I booked at the other end of it. Because you're in India, so you're challenged physically. The power doesn't work more often than not. Mm-hmm. There's no hot water. The beds are harder than the hardest stone floor you've ever been on. Nothing is in your control. I mean, this was probably the hardest thing, is I'd gone from being an adult with a degree of responsibility in my profession to not being told what time I was allowed to go to bed or what time I had to wake up in the morning. So you're eating food that you have no choice over, beautiful food, but I was used to being able to pick what I wanted to eat. There was no choice over what time to eat, when to eat, what time to wake, what time to go to bed. There often wouldn't be toilet paper. So physically you're challenged very much. Mentally you're challenged because you have no, even the myth of control is taken away.
Yeah.
And then at its peak, you're meditating for 14 hours a day. So what that looks like is waking up at 3 a.m. And then you've got food and you've got lectures, and so you're going to sleep at 12. So you've got 3 hours when you're in bed, and you're not actually sleeping because you're having so many internal experiences that it's just one big blur.
Yeah.
And it's relentless, and you're unstressing. I mean, it's just, the degree of unstressing is insane.
Your sense of perception, the things that govern your concept of reality starts to melt, right?
Oh, it's and it's only in that, again, it's only when you can look back from now that I realize what an altered state of consciousness we were all in.
Yeah. And I remember just feeling that, like you said, well, I was with Rachel for 2 weeks in India, and you're training with her for 3 months, and even just over that 2 weeks, seeing at the peak of that kind of rounding retreat, I was sitting there talking to Rachel. I remember so clearly sitting down by the Ganga, talking to Rachel, and it was like our inner children were sitting next to each other, just having a chat. And there was so much innocence and so pure, And I remember getting upset or a little bit like hurt in my heart when we were coming back out of the retreat and people started to do less rounds and more activity, and all the masking came back. And I felt so like, I just want to go back to how we were just like 5 minutes ago, like 2 days ago,
Yeah.
And it was like, you can just see how powerful it is for removing the conditioning and just exposing the inner child, innocent like state that we have at our core. And it was
100%.
Beautiful experience, but obviously 3 months of that is got to be intense.
Yeah, and then you come back and you've peeled away all of these shells, and you're still, because the unstressing continues, of course, after you've been rounding that much. So every moment you feel radically different to the moment before, and you come back and you have to engage in relationship with people. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to kind of practice this in intimate relationship with someone with whom it was still a very new relationship. And then, you've got all your other relationships where you fit in your family, your friendships. And my experience in India was, I had a lot of very big, everybody does, of course, but I had a lot of Kundalini stuff happening, and a lot of really big experiences that were quite overwhelming at the time. And a big story I had was, how am I going to be normal? How am I going to fit back in to my life? Because I am so different, and I don't know how to be anymore.
Yeah.
And I came back, and I think that I was so overwhelmed by that fear of, I guess, not fitting back in, that, I kind of in many ways went the opposite way. And so I went back into trying to fit in, and which was just so bizarre, because it's full Vedic immersion for 3 months, and you come home and you can't escape elements of that, which it's simply an expression of who you are now. It's not a choice. And here I was trying to relate to a partner who I was still in many ways getting to know. And in hindsight, I was so afraid to discover who I was now in the context of real life. I decided to kind of put all my attention on being normal. And, and the thing I clung to for being normal was having a relationship. And so since we've separated, I've realized how that I robbed. It's all perfect, so it's not like I'm regretting any of this. I don't want to sound like that, but it's been really wonderful since we've separated to actually go back to reflecting over what happened in India and how it's changed me. And now, as a single person, have rediscover what that actually means for who I am and who I want to be, and not having to water it down for anyone, which is what it comes down to. I couldn't, in many ways, I made a choice to keep the relationship instead of because that meant watering down who and what I was off the back of India. And I don't regret that choice at all, because there was a wonderful relationship in so many ways. And now I get to kind of explore who I actually really am, who I am now. And teaching has been the biggest joy, and it's choiceless, and there's nothing that there's no way that any pragya parad can come in that makes me feel for an instant that anything is more important than teaching now. And it's very strange, because I feel like I'm you spoke so beautifully about that childlike experience you have when you're doing high rounds and when you're in these really deep experiences, and it's like I'm a child working out how to adult again. And working out which parts of what my internal experience are relevant to share in any given moment, and you constantly adapting. It's been wonderful, and I can't wait.
It's a very interesting conversation too, because obviously people in higher states of consciousness like yourself, we're in a state of consciousness, but we also have the ideas of who we used to be. And it's very, we can obviously think I need to protect myself by fitting in, as opposed to, but even if we do that, it creates suffering, because what's called for is embodiment. So like, if we're denying our own embodiment, then we're going to suffer through that. And
100%. And yet the balance of that is being fully who we are in a way that's relevant and useful to the world. Because and relatable. You know, that relatability is so key. And I guess, so my experience since coming home almost 12 months now is, I guess, learning the dance between being fully who and what I am and embodying that absolutely, but in a way that's relatable, so that I can be of evolutionary use to God.
Yeah.
It would be lovely to go back to India. And did you hear about those tourists who, when India went into lockdown, they ran out of money to stay at their hotel, and so they lived in a cave outside Rishikesh for like 6 weeks before they got caught?
No.
So it was like a collection of tourists from like from Europe and America. I don't know. There were like 6 of them, and the authorities finally caught them after 4 to 6 weeks or something. Right. And now they're staying and being put up in an ashram. But I mean, I just thought, oh, I just want to go live in a cave. I just want to stay there, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. It's not the point of being a teacher. It's not my karma this time around. And and that's where the fantasy of being a nun came from when I was very young. You know, there's this deep desire in me to simply be with God, because, and this is one of the other challenges of coming home from a grounding retreat or from training, any length of time where you've had the luxury of dwelling simply, being able to devote all your time to devotion to God, is you come home and nothing's as charming.
That's right. And it's a good point as well in this time, particularly COVID. A lot of people, even if they don't even have meditation or yoga practices, because we've been locked up inside and we've been made to slow down, this is like a retreat for the collective where everyone stops, we de-excite a little bit more, we start to unstress. And so there's a collective unstressing happening, and it's choiceless in the sense that most people aren't even aware that it's happening, but it's definitely happening. And so what I can see is going to happen moving back out into the world is integration is going to be a bitch for everyone, because they don't even know that they need to integrate, but they're going to go back into these old jobs, which are like push, 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 push. And they've kind of had this experience of self where they're not as busy, a bit more connected, and they're going to feel the contrast of like, why would I want to go back into you know, and pretending to interact with people in a very false way and all these different things. It's going to be interesting to see how we integrate as a collective, as a society, you know.
And so exciting for, you know, I as teachers, it's I'm just like, okay, let's, you know, it's as all of this discomfort comes up in people and they're going to go back and they're going to be the old square peg trying to fit into that round hole.
Yes.
And that friction, please God, let that friction propel them.
Yes.
to seeking a practice that will allow them what COVID gave them in a way that's sustainable.
Yes, exactly. And then allow us to integrate that into our daily lives, into our work-life balance, and all the way through, so we can live in alignment. And I was thinking about this kind of today, actually, this morning, is like nature is literally like a wave. If you get on the wave, you can ride it effortlessly, but if you stand in front of it, it'll wipe you out. And so we have an opportunity, like we always have an opportunity or a choice. Do we want to resist and you know, try to control the wave, or do we just get on it and allow us to be carried effortlessly to our destination? And so I'm not going to resist. I'm going to jump on the wave, but I don't know what the rest of the collective's going to do.
TBC. How has it been for you? Has your life changed overly with COVID?
It's been amazing. I've just used the time to just do more meditation, more practice, more podcasting I've never podcasted on YouTube before. So this is now, that's evolving, which is awesome. I've been teaching online, as you know, I teach One Giant Mind technique. So just been teaching that online as we can. So just doing what we can, you know, and it's been really cool to see that we can connect in these virtual realms and still have, you know, contact with each other and you know, help build more connection. And apart from that, I'm just trying to work out how to best integrate this slower pace of life into the full time. Yeah, that's really what I'm desiring, is just to let this be the norm, you know. Yeah, so that's that. What about your story? Where are we up to? Are we up to right now?
think we are up to right now.
Do you have a favorite spiritual wisdom or quote then for me?
Yes, I was thinking about that, and the thing I kept coming back to was, I spoke before about how for me the experience is key, and then it's like that. What happens is this domino effect of so what's of I've had this big experience. Then what does that actually mean? How can I actually translate this in a way that means my life is going to be more evolutionary? And so this is very much what I'm focused on at the moment. And again, this is going to sound really basic to most people, and it's a concept that's, of course, been very familiar to me for a long time, but until I had the direct experience of its implications, I couldn't understand it to the degree I do now. And so there was a bit of a sequence of events, and I spent a day doing some more training with Laura. I think it was one of the cities weekends again, and watched Interstellar, and anyway, what kept coming back to.
I'm going to watch Interstellar, okay? I'm going to watch it after this.
Dan, we should do a Netflix party.
We absolutely should. Interstellar party,
yeah. Anyway, so I had this really big experience, basically, of stop rejecting the present. The concept is don't reject the present moment. So if anything was meant to be different from how it is right now, it would be different from how it is right now. By rejecting what is, you're actually rejecting God. Mm-hmm. And I had a really big, one of those crazy experiences where, I was literally sobbing and laughing, and it was, and then went to the beach, and it's kept unraveling.
I went to the beach.
Well, I had to.
Yeah.
It's the thing that calms me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've kept unraveling this thread, and the place that I arrived at recently is, if everything is perfect, if anything was meant to be different from how it is right now, it would be. Mm-hmm. What that means is that I'm not meant to be different. It means that I'm perfect. Mm. And that has been just enormous for me. Mm-hmm. Just in terms of the constant unraveling of the things that the constant building up of greater and greater degrees of self-love. Mm-hmm. The understanding that if everything is perfect, then I'm perfect. There's nothing wrong with me.
Yes.
I haven't made any bad decisions. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have done that instead of that. I'm actually fine. I'm perfect. Mm-hmm. And that has been a really big one for me to realize.
It's very beautiful. And I think that's a very great way to end this chat.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sure we'll have another one again and talk more Vedic knowledge. If people want to find you, how do we get on board? How do we find you? I don't know if you listen to the solo podcast, but
I know I have. I don't listen much anymore. I have to admit, I haven't. I've checked out of
that's fine. In one of the podcasts, and it's not worth going back to find out which one, but I did mention that Maharishi mentioned that Tameka Buckley meditation is the only way to obtain enlightenment.
Fantastic.
I don't know which episode it was.
You didn't mention it in all of them?
No, just one.
So on Instagram, I'm Tameka Buckley _meditation, and then Tameka Buckley on Facebook, and the website.
You have a .com-age?
.com. TamekaBuckley.com.
No AU?
No AU, I don't think.
You're worldwide.
Universal.
That's right.
Universal G.
Beautiful. Jai Gurudev.
I love you, Dan. Thank you.
Love you too.